Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Many space scientists will tell you that the cosmos are a harsh mistress and that the space program is very mysterious. There's a space program that we see, but there's also a space program that we don't see, and that's the magic that doesn't get reported. A darker rewrite to history. Yuri Gagarin, we celebrate his great feat of orbiting around the Earth this week. But there's a secret space program that nobody knows about. My guest, Doug Dietrich, has been revealing to you some of the secrets leading up to that program, from the Wright brothers to Roswell. And tonight we're glad to have him on the program. We're going to take a few calls right now. A lot of people have been waiting. Let's go to the calls right now.
Sounds good.
Hi, Bill. You're on Ground Zero with Doug Dietrich. Go ahead.
Hi. How are you doing, Chuck?
Good. Doing well. Go ahead.
Bill.
Go.
Hey, actually, Clyde, I wanted to, we had spoke about this before, but I wanted to run this past your guest on the Apollo mission with the lunar landers and the LEMs.
Sure, go ahead.
Specifically, when you look at the LEM and you look at the landing struts, there are actual rods that come down at a straight angle. And every time they bring out the point that there's no crater in the photograph, it's dismissed as saying, well, it obviously blew the regolith away and exposed solid rock, and that's why there is no crater. Well, where did these rods in the struts go?
You mean the rods that were at the bottom of the LEM struts? Did they go underground? Yeah. Because they wouldn't be able to go into solid rock. That's a great question, Bill. What about that, Doug? He's got a great question.
Well, unlike so many of these experts who come on and are apologists for the NASA program, I've got no stake in defending it. I tell you outright that they did a lot of filming in studio just to make it look great, because they knew they were going to get a lot of lousy footage on the moon if they indeed made it there. So there's all kinds of anomalies that just get factored into what they showed, and then there's all kinds of suspicion in terms of the NASA footage that disappeared for years, and then suddenly somebody found like a bunch of cases of it.
And then they enhanced it. They said, we went in, we enhanced it to make it look even better. And I'm thinking, yeah, so did George Lucas with the Star Wars movies.
There's no denying that. And there's no denying that in the end that many people interpreted this as a propaganda play, but the reality is that with Jack Parsons, whom Mr. Lewis brought up already, what JPL is known today as Jet Propulsion Labs, but originally it was a private laboratory known as Jack Parsons Laboratories. And what happened was Dr. Robert Goddard, who I had mentioned earlier, who had relocated himself to Roswell and basically was very wrapped up in an attempt to help the Americans defend against what he knew was coming, which was a giant Japanese dirigible biocidal attack that would that could potentially eliminate the vast majority of the American population. And it's just fortunate for all Americans that Emperor Hirohito was intent on forcing the Americans into a talk-down process so that he could force the Americans to open up their market to Japanese goods. And for anyone who doubts this, you can check into the background of any 1970s Toyota or 1960s Mitsubishi car, and it's made from American aircraft carriers that after the war were turned over to Japan to scrap and turn into Japanese cars. And this was part of the settlement agreement, just one of many, many settlement agreements he got from the U.S. out of forcing them into this kind of talk. It's the same kind of thing that goes on with North Korea. The Panmunjom peace talks are still going on today. But in terms of Jack Parsons, he basically took advantage of Dr. Robert Goddard's death. Because what happened was when those dirigibles flew in over Area 51, loaded with biocidals, and the Americans were forced into this talk-down process with the Japanese, Dr. Robert Goddard died of a heart attack that very day. And that was the exact same day as the thermonuclear weapon that was the plutonium bomb that landed on Nagasaki. And he was a very young man, comparatively speaking, only 68 years old. He died. This other clown takes over named Jack Parsons, who admittedly is a genius in chemical rocketry, but at the same time is a practicing, outspoken Satanist. And the individual later on declared himself in December of 1948, shortly after Roswell, as Beleriand Armilius el Dalgel Antichrist, and wrote the Book of the Antichrist, which was published the following year. In 1950, he was fired from Hughes Aircraft for stealing confidential documents, which he sold to Israel, concerning rocket technology. And on June 17, 1952, he died in a mysterious mercury fulminate explosion in his own laboratories. His mother committed suicide very shortly thereafter. And the man who was involved in his downward spiral into this outspoken Satanism was no one less than L. Ron Hubbard, who at the time was known as Frater H. And L. Ron Hubbard was an ex-Navy psychologist who was present at the Bikini Atoll bombings, the various other atom bomb tests, contracted radiation cancer, tried to sue the Navy for some benefits. Navy changed all its personnel records. This happens all the time. When I worked at the Presidio military base dealing with unit histories, I acted as a liaison between the Postal Library and the Letterman Army Medical Center Library, which was on base. And the Letterman Army Medical Center trained at least 25%, if not up to a third, of all Army doctors, and had done so for decades. It was a center of controversial medical experimentation on both men and animals, all the way up until base closure in 1994, and they were experts at taking away people's records and where they were at. So they just said, oh, you weren't there, L. Ron Hubbard. He got so ticked off that when he got rich and established Scientology, he bought his own fleet of decommissioned U.S. warships and sailed around the world like a private admiral. Started up this Sea Corps of his own kind of private religious navy.
This is amazing, Doug. Doug, we're going to come back. We're going to take a break. Bill, thank you for your call. Doug Dietrich, my guest tonight on Ground Zero. Amazing stuff. JPL, Jack Parsons, Satanist, L. Ron Hubbard, who also worked with him. Some amazing stuff coming out tonight about a real space program, one that you don't hear about right here on Ground Zero. We'll be back.